A slew of COVID-19 misinformation has been going viral on social media. One video making the rounds is called Plandemic. It features a former scientist claiming this coronavirus did not occur naturally. Far from it.
It's very clear this virus was manipulated. This family of viruses was manipulated and studied in a laboratory where the animals were taken into the laboratory. And this is what was released, whether deliberate or not. That cannot be naturally occurring.
That's just one example of the claims that the former scientist made in the video. It has since been removed from various social media platforms, including Facebook and YouTube. My next guest is leading a team of researchers investigating COVID-19 misinformation and how it spreads. Timothy Caulfield is the Canada Research Chair in Health and Law Policy, and he is a professor and the research director of the Health Law Institute at the University of Alberta. He joins me now from Edmonton. Timothy, welcome to you.
Thanks for having me on.
We're going to get to various examples, including the one that I just showed. But first of all, tell us about the research you've been doing on COVID-19 misinformation and how you're doing it.
Well, this is research that builds on stuff we've been doing for decades, really. We're looking at misinformation on traditional sources of news. We're looking at it on social media, of course, and we're also looking at it in the context of search engines. And then some of our research collaborators like Gordon Pennycook in Saskatchewan, we're going to look at how people actually react to that information. And of course, we want to do this in order to craft guidelines and recommendations and how we can all of us, fight misinformation.
Yeah, it's interesting. You say the context of research engines. What does that mean?
Well, what I mean by that is, search engines, I should be saying, people, search engines really shape our universe. When we have a question about something, we go to Google, we go to Instagram, and we go to Twitter, and we put in a question, and what pops up really shapes our universe. So we want to get a sense of exactly what pops up and how accurate it is.
Okay. What are some of the most common conspiracy theories that you've been hearing about?
There's so many. It's hard to keep up. Every day it seems like there's a new one, and you can kind of put them on a continuum from the absurd, the idea of like you're supposed to drink urine, cow urine to cure the disease, cocaine, bleach, those kinds of really crazy cures, to the things that seem more plausible, like the idea that we can boost our immune system with various therapies, supplements and spinal manipulation. To the ideas that seem to have more scientific validity, like the idea of the malaria drug, right? The idea that drug can actually be beneficial. And of course, that was also
right? Yeah.
Hydroxychloroquine. That's right. Can actually also lead to a lot of science policy issues and health policy issues, as we saw.
Yeah. One of the videos that's been getting a lot of traction, I've seen it in my feed, people have been sharing it, is the video called Plandemic. Let's take a listen to one of the claims mentioned in that video.
The AMA was saying, doctors will lose their license if they use hydroxychloroquine, the anti-malarial drug that's been on the list of essential medicine worldwide for 70 years. Dr. Fauci calls that anecdotal
data.
It's not storytelling if we have thousands of pages of data saying it's effective against these families of viruses.
Okay, what do you make of this claim?
Well, I can't deny that this was infuriating listening to this because it is a real misrepresentation of both the science and what the science says. Of course, she's talking about the use of this drug in the context of malaria, where it has been effective. And no, anecdotal research is not the kind of research we need in this context. And in fact, that's exactly what went off the rails, because there were a few small studies that were suggestive of the idea that this might be beneficial. And of course, what we need is good research. We need clinical trials in order to tease out what's really going on. And as that research has played out, we've seen at best, the story is more complicated than was portrayed early on, and perhaps this doesn't even work at all. So it's a really good example of how you can twist science, make something sound really credible, and inject distrust into the public discourse. So, really problematic.
Yeah, another portion of this video is also repeated by other groups as well, and that is this virus was made in a lab.
Yeah, and again, really frustrating. No evidence to support that at all. Look, if you look at the scientific consensus right now that's emerging, and yes, there's a lot of uncertainty still. That the science is tough. Everyone thinks this is a naturally occurring virus. And she really hammers home this idea that it was manipulated and then came from a lab. And that sounds intuitively pleasing because there's a complete story that people can grapple onto. It's so much easier, maybe it feels a little more attractive to have a story that provides an explanation as opposed to this is complicated, we're uncertain, and we're still investigating it. But that is not what the scientific, her story is not what the scientific consensus supports. But there also might be an ideological element to it because that story might align with people's other beliefs.
For example?
Well, perhaps they have an ideological view of the role of China here. It also supports the idea that information is being suppressed. So it sort of aligns with the deep state conspiracy theories that are out there. And therefore, if you already believe those kinds of conspiracy theories, this one might seem a little bit more plausible.
I wonder if also it's because so many people are at home alone and there are so few people to talk things over with that you don't get that kind of critical thinking and analysis that comes from just saying, hey, look at this idea. What do you think of this? Oh, yeah, and then maybe that's true or maybe that's not true or that doesn't make sense or that appears to make sense. What do you think?
That's a really good idea. And because this is such a unique situation. Now, I don't have any data to back up what you're saying. But there's certainly evidence to suggest that if you do not think about it, if you do not think critically about something, you're more likely to share it. In fact, that's one of the things that we can do as individuals is we can just remind ourselves to think about accuracy, to think about source before sharing it. And if you're alone and you're just being bombarded by all this information, social media is a very kind of frantic environment, right? It sort of invites that quick response. And if you're alone and you're dealing with social media, you're more likely perhaps to spread this stuff. So it's a good opportunity to remind people to pause and think about accuracy before they pass it along.
All right. Timothy, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Carol.
Timothy Caulfield is the Canada Research Chair in Health and Law Policy. We reached him in Edmonton.